right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kelsey Richhart, and I serve as the Associate Director for Workforce Innovation at the Manufacturing Institute. Welcome to our July Solution Series event. These are designed to bring together partnerships and manufacturers to really share insights and discuss challenges and highlight solutions that are really shaping our workforce. We're so thrilled to have you with us today, but before we dive in and introduce our guest hosts and panelists, I'd like to share just a little bit about the Manufacturing Institute with you guys. We have a really awesome team dedicated to helping support our manufacturers and our scope of programming, collaborations, and innovative research. The MI is the Workforce and Education affiliate of the National Association of Manufacturers. And these four main pillars make up the MI to help us move our mission forward. First, Heroes Make America. This team connects transitioning military members, veterans, and their spouses with manufacturing careers, offering certification and career readiness training to transition them into the workforce. Second, our Women Make America team. They're dedicated to supporting women in manufacturing through mentorship, leadership development, and national recognition. Women Make America helps manufacturers to retain and support women while also inspiring the next generation to see themselves in this industry. Third, we have FAME, which is the Federation for Advanced Manufacturing Education. This is an employer-driven apprenticeship-style model program that really trains students for advanced maintenance technician roles and really enforces a holistic employee at the end of a 2-year work and learn model. And finally, my team, which is the Workforce Innovation team. Our portfolio of innovative solutions helps our manufacturers through second chance hiring best practices, workforce policy, employer-led community development strategies, and student engagement. Now, today's event is a really awesome collaborative effort between Envoy and the Manufacturing Institute. Since early 2021, the Manufacturing Institute has spearheaded several initiatives in the second chance hiring space. And partnering with Envoy was a really important natural next step for us. And we're so proud to have supported Envoy in the onboarding and pilot testing of the new Fair Chance Navigator, which you're going to learn about today. Finally, before I really pass it on and we get into some interactive components, I want to give just a couple of housekeeping items for Zoom. This is being recorded today, and a link will be shared with all participants in the coming days. Everyone's microphones have been muted upon entering the Zoom meeting today. We really encourage you to use speaker view in the top right corner of your screen for best viewing during our discussion. And then, of course, lastly, please use the chat feature today to engage with us and share some ideas. So without further ado, I'm so excited to introduce Matt Joyce, founder and partner at Envoy, and Cassie Sproul, managing director of Envoy's Fair Chance Employment Practice. These folks are really going to guide and enhance our discussion today and really dive in and highlight our 3 manufacturing voices. So really, before we dive in, a part of the solution series is to really engage with our audience, and we want to be really active in making sure that we understand who's with us today. So the next thing that's going to happen on your screen, we're going to have an interactive poll. We'd love for you to tell us, how would you describe your organization's current involvement in second chance hiring? I'm going to give you a few seconds to tell us where you are today. Wonderful. We've got a lot. I'm seeing a lot of, we have an established second chance hiring program. Matt, I know he loves to hear that. Oh, we've got a tie. Okay, Matt, I'm going to pass it over to you with this current tie. So we have had an informal success with second chance hiring, but no formal strategy. And folks are saying we do have an established second chance hiring program. So Matt, we're ready to turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you, Kelsey. Thanks for having us. Thanks to MI for hosting the event, and appreciate everyone's participation in this. As Kelsey said, we've been working together on second chance hiring for about 4 years with the MI and with a wide variety of manufacturers. I don't think those would have been the results 4 years ago. I think this field is growing quite a lot, and I think it's clear by the panelists we have today and the folks on the call just how much employers and particularly manufacturers have adopted second chance hiring as part of their talent strategy. So really exciting to see. We're going to do a couple of quick, just sort of definitional things before we jump into the panel. For those newer to the field, when we talk about second chance or fair chance employment, we're really talking about three things. We're talking about sort of creating an HR policy environment within your company that's intentionally working toward qualifying people with past convictions, toward opening up more opportunities and candidate pipelines for people who have been impacted by the justice system. It's about proactive engagement. And so on the recruiting side, partnering with organizations that are serving people who have been impacted by the justice system and really building that into a recruiting and a talent strategy. And then thinking about internal potential barriers to long-term mobility and advancement for people with convictions. So that could be benefits, that could be mobility and sort of opportunities for promotion, but really thinking holistically about how folks who may have a record in their past are impacted by those things. We can go to the next slide. So, a few different things to share before we jump in. I think some of the big learnings for us in the last 5 years have just been how much employers who are thinking about second chance as a talent strategy are getting outstanding people and not sort of compromised by tapping into this underutilized talent pool. And so some new research has come out in the last 5 or 10 years showing people with convictions have actually tended to stay longer and advance more quickly than their counterparts. And really, making this a talent pool that is perhaps more available to folks, but also a talent pool that's going to stick around longer and going to be part of your company for a longer period of time. And so SHRM, which many of you may be involved with, the Association for HR, did a lot of polling just to understand what have been the outcomes of people with convictions, what are the perceptions of managers and of HR professionals, and really seen a lot of similarity between the performance of people with convictions and without convictions. So on the business side, a great opportunity. As we go to the next slide, also just a really important part of community impact for manufacturers. As you can see in the slide, the justice system touches a lot of people. About 1 in 3 working age people has a record of some sort. Many more than that have a family member who's been impacted by the justice system. So it's a huge part of the workforce. It's a huge part of the population in our communities. And the stat that I'll share as we jump into the panel is that the most important predictor of successful reentry for people who have been incarcerated is having a job. And so those of us who are employing second chance strategies are doing good for our business, but also really helping our community with safety and with the success of those people who have been impacted by the justice system. So with that, we'll go to the next slide. I'm really excited to jump into our panel. We've got 3 amazing folks whose companies and personally have really invested in second chance as part of their work. And I think as we jump into this, you'll hear 2 themes emerge from the companies that are doing this in practice. I think one is strategies that just think about how do we expand the talent pool? How do we use second chance as a means to grow the number of people that are part of our pipeline that are engaged and applying to jobs at our company? And the second is thinking about, for those people who apply, how do we maximize the number that can make it through our process? So how do we reduce disqualifications and make sure that we're really being nuanced about how we do background screening and how we consider convictions to try to get people who are qualified for the job into those roles. And so with that, I'm going to introduce our panel. We can pull down the slides. We have 3 great folks. I'm going to start with Ken Kuamura, who's the Manager of Strategic Partnerships at Union Pacific. Ken, thank you for joining us. JJ Gert is the Senior Director of Talent Acquisition at Xylem. Thank you, JJ. And Tanisha Walker is the Director of Diversity and Inclusion at Komatsu. Really appreciate all of you being with us today. And we're just going to jump right in to some questions. We'll have a chance as we get through the panel to invite questions from the audience, and hopefully we can get a lot of your questions for this group in. But Ken, I'm going to start with you.
Okay.
And just get your sense of sort of the rationale that for Union Pacific jumping in to Second Chance. You all have been doing this for several years now. You've done it across your footprint in a really coordinated way. Talk about how it started, and what sparked your initiative to begin with.
Yeah, Matt, thanks, and thanks for having me on. It started out. We were doing a strategy session with our vice president, and she threw out the question: What happens if your traditional talent pipelines start to dry out? Where would you go? Where would you go find talent? And then all of a sudden, we got hit with COVID, and it became a reality. The talent pipeline uh, started to shut down, the traditional pipelines. And so, we needed to, as a business, to fill positions. And, it was important for us to quickly fill some of those positions. And so developing our program, getting out there, developing the strategies uh, to help fill those immediate needs was great. But now we're trying to go back and try shoring up some of the things and trying to make the program better. It's been successful.
Thanks, Ken. And to that end, we have watched this program grow from some pilot sites that you all were doing in Texas and California to being a bigger part of your national hiring strategy. Can you talk a little bit about kind of the partnership model that you have, and the way in which you've done recruiting with organizations in your communities to try to drive that pipeline?
Right. And it, go looking back, right, we started it one time and we failed miserably because we didn't really know what we were doing. And then we came back and did our research, and found that there were organizations out there that do this already, and provide some kind of network for these individuals that are trying to re-enter into the regular workforce. And so what we did was select two that were probably close to what we need, and identify those two through a matrix that we built, and started working with those partners. Those partnerships became very important even today. We started out meeting monthly, bi-weekly, now it's just we call each other just to say hello. But those partnerships are very important because they helped us. I attribute all our success to our community partners. They're the key to the success of our program. And I can't say enough about them.
Thanks. And Ken, just one more. When you think about kind of where you've come from 4 years ago and where you are now, can you just share a little bit about what Second Chance and the integration of these strategies has kind of meant to your candidate pool, to your recruiting? Have you seen kind of market differences in your ability to get enough people, more people, qualified people into the pipeline?
Oh yeah, most definitely. I mean, for the very initial trying to get people through the hiring process, it's not even half as long as it used to be to come through the pipeline. The other thing, the quality, our community partners understand what it takes to be successful inside Union Pacific. So the quality that we're receiving from them, and you know, we've made that decision to now, our philosophy is, quality over quantity. And so if, before we would get 20 applicants, today we might get 5 from them, but they've done their vetting and they know who would be successful going in through the pipeline. And it's just become, a quality product, that we get. It's become a go-to strategy for our recruiters, especially in locations that we have hard time finding people who work there or fill jobs there. Second Chance is where they go. Most of the recruiters will come in and start looking into the Second Chance pools.
Thanks, Ken. And it's a good segue, JJ, to you. I know we've talked a lot about the importance of kind of efficiency and trying to move through processes like background screening to kind of get to talent as quickly as possible. So I'm interested to hear that, but I want to go back a little to the beginning with Xylem as well, JJ, and just hear a bit from you, kind of what motivated Xylem to get started in this work, and how you kind of brought different actors in the company together to build a strategy.
Yeah, so thanks, Matt, and thanks to Ken and Tanisha as well. When we look at Xylem and in our organization, Diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging are incredibly important. They're ingrained in our DNA. And, this population of the world is underrepresented. They're missing an opportunity. 27% of them are unemployed versus 4.1% of the rest of the population. And, when we look at DE&I as Xylem, and it's not just about, race or ethnicity or gender. It's really bringing in diverse mindsets and from all different attributes. And so when we think about the organization and the commitment that we have at our leadership level, this was an easy sell. It was one that really didn't take much convincing of, that just kind of, it worked for us because, in our core, this is an incredibly important component of our culture.
Thanks. And JJ, like Ken, I know Xylem has done a lot of proactive work on the recruiting side, built some pilots in different cities where you're partnering with different community-based organizations. The other thing that I know Xylem has seen is a real difference kind of year over year as you've incorporated these strategies in the number of people who have been stopped at the point of the background screen. And that number going down quite a lot, and you've been able to move more folks through. Can you just talk a little bit about how'd you do that? What's that looked like for the company?
Well, we really took a hard look, and it's an iteration. And anything with these types of programs, you're never. Ken mentioned how he failed early, right? But fail early, fail fast, and learn from it. We've learned that, or we've taken a look of what's really important to the job. And what we were seeing before is we took a kind of single lens approach, and all of our background checks kind of had the same level of requirements. They went back the same length of time, which were a long period of time. And then we really wanted to understand what's important for the role. Is XYZ charge centric, or is it going to impact one's ability to do that job? And in taking a deeper look at that and refining our adjudication matrix as part of our background check review process, we've been able to reduce the number of background checks that we need to review by more than half, right? We're increasing the number of background checks that came through, but had less than half of the background checks to review, because we've been able to shorten the window that we look back, and also really look to make the background check, or whatever charge it may be that someone's convicted of, how relevant is it to their job? And that's made a huge impact, and one of the things that I'm really proud of that we've been able to accomplish.
Great. Thanks, JJ. Tynesia, I'm going to turn it over to you. Komatsu is at perhaps an earlier stage of this work, though doing a lot already. Big company, international company. One of the things I know Komatsu's put a lot of time into is trying to engage as many people as possible, from executive leadership all the way through into the process. And I wondered if you could talk a little bit about kind of your strategy for building excitement about this work across the company and getting folks involved.
Absolutely. Well, I think JJ tried to steal some of my thunder with the whole inclusion as part of our DNA, so I'll skip that part. But I will say that when I first started thinking about this, I was really excited about this space and time, because to your point earlier, we're at a place now where the business case supports the passion that most of us have for this work. And so that makes it a much easier sell, but there's still perceptions to manage. And so when I first started thinking about how do I get the most people on board, or how can we have a successful pilot, I was like, well, it can't just all start and stop with me. So I decided that the more people that had, I guess we say, like, skin in the game, the more that they were committed to the success of this pilot too. And so I knew that we had some executives that were passionate, who had done a lot of years of volunteer work in this space. We had executives that were committed to expanding our talent pool, maybe hadn't considered this particular demographic, but were open to the concept of like, what is it that we need to do, similar to Ken's leadership. And so I started putting those two types of leaders together, and it just made sense. And so we formed our advisory council, which includes our legal team, executive team members. We also opened this up as a developmental opportunity for people in talent acquisition who had never worked with this specific population and had never shaped policy before. So we really put a lot of hands on deck to make sure that we can get this a strong kickoff so we can carry it across the finish line.
I'm so glad you said that about the kind of developmental opportunity. And I think something we've seen across the board is if these decisions and these strategies are just sort of made at the executive level, it's much harder to actually do the work without kind of bringing folks on board, distributing it across the country, building consistency. And I think, training and sort of building people who are involved in the process, but not always involved in policy making into the conversation is really important. One other thing, Tanisha, I'm curious about on your end. So like Ken and JJ, Komatsu is kind of looking at markets where this work could be particularly effective. And I was just curious, as you kind of look across Komatsu's footprint and think about, where do we want to get started in this work? If there are any themes that you see in some of the places where you feel like, yeah, we should, if we're going to start anywhere, we should start, in this site.
Yeah, one of the themes is how many people are we sifting out of our process versus into our process? And so we have a number of our locations are in remote locations, like a lot of manufacturing organizations are. And so you already have a limited talent pool in that regard. And then you are narrowing down 1 and 3. So then you have this teeny tiny talent pool that you're looking to work with. And so when we think about locations, we're thinking about places where we're expanding. And we know that we want to be able to reach the most amount of qualified talent as we can. And when we look throughout, when we take a look back, how many people have we filtered out of our process versus in?
Great. Thanks, Tanisha. So I'm going to pause us for one moment to invite questions from the group. I think we have a sheet we can put up. Just there we go. If anyone has questions for Tanisha, Ken, or JJ, please feel free to enter those. So as those come in, we'll sift through and make sure we get to as many questions as we can. In the meantime, Ken, I'm going to go back to you. And I feel like even though Union Pacific may have only started this work 4 or 5 years ago, you're a seasoned veteran in this. And so wanted to just get your sense of, as companies are getting started in this work, if you've got pieces of advice for, the champions in the company or leaders in the company that want to do this work right.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like Tanisha said, you've got to get them on board. I mean, I can tell you, first, I've shared this story with you guys many times, but the first hire we hired lasted, 3 days and then was terminated because he failed the drug test. I thought, oh, well, that's the end of this program. But we had champions inside. So it's important. And again, if I had to redo that pilot that we did the first time, is include more people, because you can't do it in a silo. You've got to get other people on. You got to be able to have those champions internally inside the company. That would be one. The other thing is ask. I would say anybody that's out there wanting to even improve their programs, ask. There's resources out there. That there's a lot of people out there that can help you and answer questions. And I guarantee you, there is no situation that they have not, come across yet that they can't give you some help or some kind of feedback. The common theme between all three of us, I kind of chuckle back here because we all had the same issues starting out. And so, by coming to things like this kind of helps you. It helps you build that playbook and be on the same page. And I guarantee you, there's nobody on this call right now or on this panel that wouldn't take a call from you if you ever needed any help.
Thanks, Ken. I see questions coming in, and we're going to jump into those. I do want to just, JJ, go over to you. One of the really cool things Xylem has done in the last year is to build a page around Fair Chance as part of your careers website. And, was curious, we can throw that in the chat, hopefully, so folks can see it. But, that sort of by its nature means, you're going public with this work. You're talking about it to both job seekers and more broadly. And just wanted to hear from you kind of what that took to be able to not only do this work internally, but to kind of push it out as part of your out-facing careers. Page.
Thanks, Matt. Appreciate it. We talked about how DE&I is ingrained in our DNA, and as everyone here probably knows, that it's so important to include belonging into that. And this population is challenged. They're scared to apply to jobs. I've talked to countless candidates that are worried about it. And our approach was to be honest and transparent, and to encourage people to say, hey, we do want you to apply. And we ultimately look at everything on an individual case-by-case basis, and really want to make the best determination for the organization. And being transparent and honest, it's ingrained into our high impact culture as well. So it's really important. It fits our brand of what we want to do as an organization that wants to make an impact on the world.
Thanks, JJ. I'm going to go to one of the questions that came in through the chat, coming from someone who's an employment specialist on the workforce side, and asked, what strategies can you offer me as I search to find and partner with companies that employ second chance candidates? Any advice for those who are working with job seekers on how to best partner with companies?
Mine is find the right partner like Envoy. It's really important. There's some other groups out there that can help identify who those are. There's if you're a federal contractor and you recognize that you need to post roles and be compliant for OFCCP perspectives, there's companies like Direct Employers who have a huge list of network groups that can help identify those. But as we continue to expand our pilot sites, having a partner like Envoy makes it so great to help vet those. And as Ken was talking about, they know what kind of candidates to submit, and having that relationship and partner with Envoy really helps.
I just want to chime in here. I think that's a critical piece because, I talked about getting as many people on board as I possibly could. And so that made this project highly visible as well, right? So that means that this thing is too big to fail, and which means that it has to have infrastructure in place. And we don't have, a dedicated team of 3 and 4 people standing up this infrastructure within our organization. So our partnership with Envoy was critical. Once people heard that Envoy was coming on board, and now people are taking my calls, and it's all that type of thing. And so having that partner like Envoy is really a big piece to set that infrastructure up for you.
Yep.
JJ and Tanisha, you are the best. I appreciate the kind words. And then Ken, I'll throw it over to you to answer that question as well, because I know you've also put a lot of thought into that specific matrix of the skills that you need at UP and the training and preparation that your workforce partners are giving you. So I'll throw that one over to you.
Right. I can't agree more that, working with Matt and his group has been fantastic. I mean, they helped us develop that matrix that we actually put our community partners through, and it works. It gets us both, the organization and ourselves on the same playing field. And as we start talking and we start meeting with them monthly, we continue to work on that one page that we give them that says, hey, these are the things that we absolutely need for them to be successful when they come in here. And if you're on the other side, if you can, have those kind of questions like, what's it take to be successful inside your company? What kind of training do we need? I mean, we have meetings where they bring in 20, 30 people, and we start talking about, like OSHA training. We had a majority of the folks that weren't passing the safety test. I'm like at 80%. We were getting knocked out. But then we came back and we talked and we said, well, what's a quick fix? What's a remedy? You know, they're like, well, there's this class out there they can take. They added it. We're like below 3% failure when it comes to the safety. So discussions like that, having to come in, being open to what the employer needs and knowing what the employer needs and working together is the is what we do, and it works wonderful for us. We are in 37 different sites now, so it works.
Awesome. Awesome. I'm going to put two questions together that have come in through the chat. The first is just broadly speaking, getting your sense of how you determine, what convictions may preclude someone from qualification. And then specifically, another question was about folks who are on the sex offense registry and if there are different ways that you all approach that. So to the extent anyone's able to talk about kind of specifically thinking about different convictions and how you treat those. A few questions about that.
So I can tell you, JJ, what we've learned is we get asked, especially when we first kicked off the program. It seems like every reporter, every TV station, when they find out that a company our size is into the second chance space, first question is so I guess you're hiring murderers now. I guess you're hiring rapists and things like that. The standard answer in our company, and then when we train our talent acquisition folks, the standard answer is we hire the most qualified. And so everybody's going to get a look. We've got things in place where if something comes up, in their background, we're going to have a second review and we're going to talk about it. We're going to give that person an opportunity to tell their side of the story. There's one thing that we found out being in this space is there's always two sides to the story. Now, there's going to be some people we can't hire. We absolutely can hire. And, most of the times when they're going through the second review, it's those individuals that still don't accept responsibility, blame the world, or have reoffended once they come out again. Those are the folks that won't be successful, but it's not specific to the crime. It's to the attitude and the behavior that these folks have. And it goes back to those community agencies, right? We talk to them. I like to have the community agency on the phone when we're doing the second review with the folks, because they know that if it starts going downhill and they start to blame people and then they're not going to be successful.
Yeah, Ken, you're spot on. The individual assessment process, right? After we've seen what that conviction is, we have that discussion, and it's a guided interview that enables us to really get to the heart of the matter and understand what happened, what they learned from it, how they've accepted responsibility for it, is really important. Also, our entire organization knows that we're a fair chance employer, but nobody needs to know the background of somebody else. Some things can be found publicly, but ultimately, we don't broadcast that. We don't even for the most part, inform our hiring managers as to what may have come up. It's really done in a confidential matter. But the most qualified person is absolutely going to get the role. That said, we have a lot of external customers that we go onto their sites to perform work for, and they may have very different requirements as to who they'll allow to access their sites. And so for our organization, right, we do a lot of work in the refinery space, and there are clearinghouses that they have to make. So when we have individuals that come through with a background that may have something on it, we do take that in consideration, because if they have to be able to do the work, they need to be able to perform the essential functions of the role. And if something in their background precludes them from performing the essential functions of the role, they would be excluded. But it's difficult to say that, because it could be one customer could say this, one customer could say that, and it's not quite cut and dry.
Yeah, thanks, JJ. It's an interesting dynamic for second chance employers to both think about, their contractors and the regulatory environment and the constraints they deal with. And also on the other side, sometimes it's the suppliers and the staffing agencies that you have to educate and advocate with, because they might have restrictive policies in who they're bringing in. And as the client, being able to say, hey, no, we're quite open to these different convictions and aligning those policies. We had a question about pushback internally. So perhaps not just the news story and what you hear from customers, but have you had the experience of people within the company saying, hey, I heard about this and I'm not so sure? And just kind of curious how you all have talked with your teams about this work.
So I'll go first again. Yeah, it helps to have that champion, especially at the top of the food chain, right? It helps to have that champion. But I can tell you that we've had a couple of people that have pushed back. And so what we quickly did was we put a slide together. And when we started presenting to the different departments and internally, we put up the 5 questions that we always get. Why are you all in this space? Why aren't you recruiting veterans? Well, we are recruiting veterans. We haven't stopped doing anything else that we haven't doing. We're just exploring a new space. And then, I don't feel safe working next. Well, you don't even know. You could already be working next to somebody that has some kind of effect. And so we put, these 5 major questions that we got, and I'm telling you, I would say it's been at least 2.5 years that I have not heard somebody, that we haven't gotten any. In fact, we got floods of employee referrals from family members, cousins, brothers, sons, daughters. They're like, they know we're second chance now. So just put it out there. You're going to have some naysayers, but just, answer their questions. Most of the time they're not very educated in that space and don't really know what they're saying.
Thanks, Ken. I'm going to wrap us with this question. We had a great question come in about metrics. What are the measures that you look at to be successful? So I'm going to frame it in a slightly different way. And Tanisha, start with you and just ask each of you, what does success look like? 2, 3, 5 years down the line as you're doing this work, what does it look like to be successful? And perhaps what measures do you use to know you're successful?
Yeah, I'm glad you started with me because, JJ's no, I'm just kidding. JJ, you're amazing. No, really, to me, that infrastructure being in place is the top metric. And the reason I say is not that I plan on leaving the organization, not that any, personal things will change, attitudes, feelings, those things, but that infrastructure is that safety net that says whether or not you feel like this, whether or not Tanisha is in the role, this work continues. And so it's like the foundation for how we move this along. So that's the measure 1. And then the second measure I think about is through the matrix that you're helping us build. When we look at 2024, 25, how many people we were not being able to bring in, and then to see an exponential growth of how many people we are able to bring in around specific roles, because we have some really hard roles to fill. And we do ourselves this injustice by keeping that pool so tiny. So like we've been trying to fill this role or that role for the past 6 months and seeing that, oh, we were able to fill this role within 1 month, 2 weeks, whatever. So those are the top metrics that I look at, being able to sustain the work regardless to who's in this seat. And then being able to really fill those hard to fill roles in a shorter time frame.
Awesome. That was an incredible answer. And I'm going to use that to wrap us up. Thank you, JJ, Ken, Tanisha. This has been such a great conversation, and it's so nice to be able to get all of your insights and perspectives having done this work. So thanks for being with us. And we are going to transition over to my colleague, Cassie Spruill, who's the managing director of the Fair Chance practice at Envoy, to talk a little bit about the Fair Chance Navigator, which my 1-sentence introduction is: we hope that all of this great knowledge and experience and strategy that's being developed in the field can start to live within a self-guided platform and a tool that can be more accessible and more universal. So Cassie, with that, I'll pass it to you.
Thank you. And thank you to all the panelists. I always feel so energized after I hear each of you speak. And it really did tee us up so nicely to talk about how do we get to adoption. I've seen great conversation in the chat about, okay, we hear you, we're bought in, now what? And so excited to talk about what this now what could look like. As Matt said, this is a tool that Envoy built and is working with partners like the Manufacturing Institute to disseminate the tool out to employers who are interested in building and implementing their fair chance strategies. So in a moment, I'm going to actually demo it so you can see what's in the Navigator and how it would work for you as an employer. But the goals of the Navigator are to align with best practices, many of which you heard from the panel, streamline your HR processes, looking everything from the interview process to your background check process to that individual assessment that you heard JJ and Ken both speak to. Recruit qualified candidates. So working with community partners, which again, I know I saw in the chat is one of the things that a lot of folks are interested in learning more about. And we have a lot of great content within the Navigator that speaks to this. And then lastly, thinking about employee retention and mobility. We're not just focused on hiring folks, we're also focused on retaining them and helping them grow within the organization. So here are the features of the Navigator that you'll see as I pull up the demo. Throughout, we have best practice videos from employers, some of who you may recognize. We have step-by-step instructions on how to create and update your fair chance employment practices that are partnered with activities. And these activities allow you to really document and sustain your fair chance initiative. Tynesia couldn't have teed that piece up better about how important it is, whether it's due to turnover or new positions. You really want to document your strategy so that it lives on within your organization, and the Navigator allows you to do that. And then you have access to us consultants along the way to support you as you may come across questions or challenges along the way. So with that, let's go to the Navigator. I wish I had a drum roll, but here is the Navigator. Hopefully you all are seeing that. This is our tool. It looks similar to, I would say, a learning management system, but it really is truly so much more because of the interactive components that are a part of it and the goal that you're documenting the strategy along the way. So as you can see here on the left, there are 7 modules, and then there's also this introduction piece. I'm going to walk through a few components just so you can get an idea of what's really in the Navigator. But the 6 core modules that you'll see here, we start with planning and thinking through who needs to be at the table, what components are really important, what are your goals. Then you have the fair chance policies, which is really where you get into the meat of those hiring policies, the matrix you heard about, all of the really core HR things that you heard from our panel. Then the candidate experience, which is such an important part of this. So what's happening during the interview process, what's happening as they get to an individual assessment. We actually have that individual assessment guide as a component of this that you heard JJ mention. Then staff training and readiness. So how do you make sure your team feels ready to take on this initiative and be able to answer their questions? What training do you need to bring them on? Recruiting and retention partnerships. This is where you identify your community partners. We have a framework that I'll show that really highlights what questions you should be asking and how you find the right community partners. And then lastly, measurement and integration. For any workforce program, it's such an important piece to be able to measure your success and also integrate it into other parts of your business, whether it's into your CSR strategy or your procurement strategy. That's really the next level as you're thinking about fair chance. And then lastly, this implementation component, which I will highlight as we get there. So let's jump into the intro. This highlights a lot of what I just mentioned around the different modules and what you can expect. We then have a larger definition of fair chance employment. I know Matt walked through the definition when he kicked off his the beginning slides, but this is really important as you bring in those upper leaders or other folks within your organization to make sure that you're all aligned on how you're defining fair chance. So we wanted to give a pretty comprehensive definition for alignment. And then we have this glossary. The glossary includes not only the terms that you'll find throughout the Navigator, but also terms that are part of the criminal legal system. We know that everyone's not experts in the system. It has a lot of different nuances and language. And so a big part of the opening to the Navigator is making sure that you have definitions for different language so that you feel prepared as you're going through this. And then lastly, this how to use Navigator. This component allows you, maybe you have a colleague that you think would be really interested in this, but isn't on today. It's a really comprehensive description on how you use the Navigator and all of the different components. So let's jump into the first module. In each piece, you'll see that we have an overview of what will be a part of the module, and then also advice from employers. Here you'll see Monique Williams. She's with AmFam, and she's talking about building that working group and how to bring key leaders to the table, which, again, as you heard from the panel, is such an important piece of fair chance and making it effective. And then from there, we jump into the steps. We were really intentional about making sure the steps were digestible for the employers who are going through this, and really has the key information you need to master that step and move on to the next step to build your strategy. A big piece of starting this work is having the data and being able to use that data to sell and pitch and get buy-in within your organization. So this is a lot of that data pulled together with sources so that you have that on hand as you're having conversations internally. Next is talking about building that working group and the core folks who should be at the table for that, which I won't go over because you heard a lot of that from our panel, but I did want to highlight what the action items look like. So each of the action items have the ability for you to document what you ultimately decide when it comes to that action step. So here you would document who your core working group members are and who your broader working group members are. And again, this allows you to document your strategy, have it in hand, and ultimately compile all of your action steps to have your full strategy. So as I go back, just to show you what this would look like as part of the Navigator, once you finish your action step, then you can go to the submission tab once you do all of your action steps in that module and upload them. When you upload them, we get them on the back end. And once you complete all of the action steps, we will compile those, create a summary, and provide feedback along the way of all of your action steps compiled. And so you really will have that full list and full strategy at the end. I wanted to then jump into the policies and give you just a taste of what one of the videos from an employer looks like. This face might look familiar to some of you. This is Leslie Cantu. She's a true leader in the fair chance space. So let's listen to Leslie for a moment and hear what she had to say about how they developed their policies.
I am Leslie Cantu. I'm the Vice President of Administration with Toyotetsu, Texas. Going back to 2018, when we started our initiative, the unemployment rate was very low nationally, at the state level, and even lower at the San Antonio city level. We were struggling to find talent to fill our open positions. We had other challenges, such as being in a more rural area of a larger urban area, which means we're not on public transportation. In addition, we're on an industrial park campus with 24 competitors doing very similar or same type of work. And so for us, it really was born out of a need to think outside of the box and try to figure out how we could find talent that we could hire.
So obviously Leslie continues, and we're so thankful to have her a part of this. And it's just a great example of what you can expect from the different videos throughout and really hearing from your employers. I'm going to jump down now to another section, which is the recruiting and retention partnerships, because I saw a question about this in the chat. So we do have in here, we define what a community partner means and the role that they should play as a part of your Fair Chance initiative. And then we also have this component that is the framework. And you heard specifically Ken speak to the framework. That's such an important piece when looking for your community partners. And that's looking at everything from their work readiness, their reentry supports, do they have employer referrals? And we have another action step that allows you to go through and use this guide to ultimately decide who is your best partner. And you can document that again, so that you have that internally on how you made that decision, how you looked at different components of a community partner and ultimately decided who would be the right fit for you locally. So as I go back, there's just two more pieces I want to show you. As we get to this implementation component, once you've gone through all the modules, all the steps, and uploaded your action steps, you will go to your implementation checklist and have an opportunity to really reflect on what you've done, how you've gone through this, and where you are in those steps. And it will also give us information on, are you still exploring? Have you implemented? And we'll use this information as we look at the action steps that are submitted as well. Lastly, to round it out, you'll go in and you'll request your fair chance strategy. And again, this is where we compile it, take a look, summarize it, and get it back to you as your internal strategy for your organization. One piece that I didn't get a chance to mention that you probably saw as I was going through, that at the bottom of every module, there's this consultation and support piece. We are giving all MI registrants who sign up for the Navigator a 30-minute consultation to be able to meet with us to talk through what are the specific challenges you're facing. How are you talking, or what challenges are you facing internally, and how can we help support you? So you can go in through the Navigator and submit the opportunity to kind of work with us and talk through some of the challenges you're facing. So with that, I'm going to go back. Obviously, that was a quick overview, but I wanted to make sure that I highlighted some of the core pieces, and now we can jump into who should be the user for this. So let me go back to my slides. So looking at who we think of as the user for the Navigator, it's all of you on this call. So thinking of folks who may be in HR, legal, all of the different components or folks that are important to an overall fair chance strategy. We found that some folks use this as professional development, which you heard Tynesia mention for their talent acquisition team, that bringing on someone for professional development to look into what are your current strategies around fair chance employment and utilizing the Navigator as a tool to ultimately make those decisions. We've seen folks in HR use this, as well as legal, who are dealing with some hard questions and want to make sure they're going back and looking at their strategy. So it really is can be used across your organization. It's just really, does that person have the ability to look into the information that they need in order to build this strategy? So how do you get access? So as an employer, typically the annual subscription to get access to the Navigator is $9.95, but because of our work with the MI, we're actually giving it for 50% off. So if you go to fairchancenavigator.com, you can use the code MI50 and you'll get 50% off that annual subscription along with that 30-minute consultation as you would like. So I also have a QR code at the end that you can scan to be able to get access. And I believe that we're dropping the link in the chat too. Associations, if there's associations on, we love to share this with members because we know that workforce is a challenge for many folks. And so we have multiple models to collaborate with you, and just you can reach out to us to discuss that more. And similarly with workforce and reentry organizations, I know I saw someone in the chat say, how do I find these employers? How do we work with them? And sometimes employers just don't know where to get started. And so sharing the Navigator with them is a great way to get them engaged and hopefully be a great partner to you. With that, I'm going to have Matt come back. Hopefully we have time for a couple questions.
Thanks, Cassie. We do have a couple questions that have come in. One is just about sort of the consistency of updating of the Navigator and whether it's a static tool or whether it will continue to be updated with new content?
Great question. It is not static. It's something our team is constantly looking at, thinking about, and we're actually in the process of building another version that's going to continue to get more and more dynamic. So we are constantly learning through our work, and we will make sure that this is updated as we learn new things or new things are happening in the field.
Great, thanks. And then another question that came in the chat, thank you, Rachel, was about whether there are state and federal regulations that hinder second chance hiring. And I wonder if you could speak to that from kind of the content of the Navigator and what's there to help guide.
Yes, so one thing I didn't get a chance to show you, but that we have in the Navigator is a very extensive regulatory framework research that will answer a lot of those questions. There are definitely different rules in different states, especially around fair chance hiring. And so making sure you have knowledge of those is so important, especially if you are a company that has multi-site locations. And so that is a component of the Navigator and can be a great resource.
Right. And I'll invite, if there are any last, we have a minute or two left, questions, please put them in the chat. But we'll also just add, Rachel, to that question. I think a lot of the policy making that we guide folks through in the Navigator and that you've heard from the panel is about just thinking about risk mitigation. And so it's, yes, there could be kind of industry regulations that affect how you can hire and who you can hire. But it's also thinking about compliance with the EEOC guidance, and I see John put that comment in the chat, and also working with your legal team to figure out, where does your liability stand? Is there sort of risk? And I think hearing JJ and Ken talk a lot about like the right sort of qualifications for the job and making sure that the conviction is not job relevant is a big part of that conversation. So a lot of the content around policy development is around how do we manage risk? How do we think about risk on both sides of that? I have one more specific question that came in, Cassie, which is just, does the Navigator require downloading anything, or is it all cloud-based?
All cloud-based. So hopefully it's accessible to everyone, but if you have any challenges, you can just reach out to us at navigator@envoy.us. And with that, I see Kelsey coming back. Hi, Kelsey. I will pass it back to you.
Wonderful. I hope that you will stay with us for 3 more minutes as I thank our panelists and our guest hosts today, Cassie, Matt, and Sophia at Envoy. It is a dream to partner with you. We thank you so much for leading this conversation today. JJ, Tynesia, and Ken, thank you for being boots on the ground and really, highlighting these second chance practices that are working. We appreciate what you are doing and that you were available to share today. Thank you so much. For everyone on the call today, you will receive follow-up communication from us next week, which will include the link to this viewing, as well as some really awesome follow-up information and that QR code that gets you that half off on the Navigator. Thank you so much, Envoy. Really quick, I want to make sure that I invite you to our Manufacturing Institute Workforce Summit. We will continue these wonderful conversations with leaders across the country. And so this is really what the solution series comes to. We want to bring you all together to share these best practices in person. So that is in October in Charlotte, North Carolina. You can scan that QR code on your screen there to register. We also want to make sure that we tee up our next solution series. Please be sure to join us in August with Timken. We're really going to talk about engaging the next generation of talent. How do we recruit Gen Z and retain them? So some really awesome topics and highlighting our partner Timken there on some best practices. I want to thank everyone again for being here today. We appreciate you and have a happy Thursday.